Well, I'm an electrical engineer, and I always tinkered with electrical stuff, and always interested in rechargeable batteries. And about the time I retired in 2006, I looked around and found on the internet a Miles electric vehicle, a low-speed vehicle for sale, and bought it. I was able to get it up from about 25 mile an hour maximum to 40 mile an hour maximum. Made it a little more useful, and then I kept that car until 2011. I knew Chevrolet was going to be coming out with their Volt. So 2 years before they came out with it, I told Joe Holland Chevrolet in South Charleston that I wanted one as soon as they could get one. So it ended up being a 2012 model that I got in the fall of 2011. So it's a very good car. I drove it until 2018, and that's when I was able to get my Tesla.
I've always been interested in efficient transportation. I was big into bicycling, still am. And then when I first read about the EV1, I really wanted one of those. I thought it was a great little car. And of course, GM took them all back and crushed them. If you've ever seen Who Killed the EV, put out a few years ago. And then when I was listening to National Public Radio 10 years ago, and I heard that Saudi princes were using oil money from us, from America, to fund Al-Qaeda to kill American troops. And the next day I went and I ordered a Chevy Volt, and I ended up being the first West Virginian to register a Chevy Volt. I still own it. My son's driving it these days. And it's 9 years old. We've got 135,000 miles on it. Still working well.
Okay, this is our Volt, and we got it in 2013. I guess I was just really interested in the idea of an electric car. We also have some solar panels, just thinking about ways to cut back on gas. So we went and looked at the dealers, and I thought it was a really comfortable car in the front. It's pretty small in the back, but since we were retired, we figured we could manage a car for around town for the two of us. It's actually a hybrid car, so you plug it in and it charges up to 40 some miles on electric, and then if you drive further, it just automatically switches to the gas, and you can't really feel it or tell it, except the little thing on the dashboard turns from green to blue. So it's been a great car. We've had it, I guess that's 8 years, and no problems with it.
I guess it's my engineering background and just being, chemical, but still interested in efficiency and doing things the best way and low life cycle cost of processes. And this is definitely, I think, going to be my lowest life cycle cost car when you consider the original slightly high cost, but very low cost to operate on a 2.5 cents of electricity per mile basis, and maintenance. All I've had to do to this car is rotate tires, align them. We've already put one set of tires to replace the original ones, but expect they'll last a good long time. So the cost to operate the car are extremely low compared to the other cars. Kind of warmed up on a couple of hybrid cars, a Camry hybrid and a Prius hybrid, and the next car that we buy will probably replace our minivan, and we're thinking of a Tesla Cybertruck to replace that so we can tow a camper.
It's very quiet to drive and very easy to drive. It does take a little getting used to that nothing is right in front of you, it's in the screen beside you, but once you get used to that, I'm not as confident of driving in the autopilot mode as my husband is, but I do like it in the cruise control mode. And I do get to drive it when I'm going the furthest that day.
We've got 40,000 miles now on this Tesla. Got it in Memorial Day weekend of 2018, and just absolutely adore it. My wife and I enjoy driving it. My kids fight over who is going to drive it when they're with us. We've taken it on trips all the way up to Wisconsin during the winter time. We can get all our gear in it.
But one of the nice things in West Virginia is that it's called one pedal driving. You hardly ever have to touch a brake, so you can go on these winding roads and just speed up and slow down without switching to the brake, and it's just a fun way to drive. It's the Volt has a certain amount of regenerative braking. The Chevrolet Bolt has a little bit better, and the Tesla is great because it will even come to a stop. You can drive it almost all day and not ever touch the brake.
Now the Chevy Bolt has 4 ways actually of instituting regeneration of power into the battery. One is you just take your foot off the gas and coast. The second is you put your foot on the brake pedal. It does have regenerative braking in addition to squeezing the calipers. Then the third thing is there's a little paddle right here on the side of the steering wheel, and that's, if I pinch that, it puts in regeneration and slows the car to a complete stop. And the fourth way is you can shift into low, which is meaning that it's like you're squeezing that regen paddle all the time. And so those 4 ways are the way that the car puts energy back into the battery.
People always ask me, yeah, but how do electric cars do on our steep mountain roads? And I have to tell them, steep, windy mountain roads, that's the best conditions for electric cars. Because when you let your foot off the accelerator, the regenerative braking slows the vehicle down and puts power back into the batteries. So whenever you go around a curve or down a little incline, you're recharging your battery. We took a little pleasure drive a couple weekends ago, just exploring old mountain back roads. We drove around Hicks Mountain for 2 hours and ended up with more miles on our range indicator than what we'd started with.
This is a 2017 Toyota Prius Prime. I purchased it in Virginia in 2017, and it charges at my house. I get about 28 to 32 miles per charge, and then it switches to the gasoline engine. And I charge it at my house, and I also have solar panels in my house, so actually some of the transportation is actually powered by the sun, because I have solar panels in my house and I charge it at my house. So We're trying to move into the 21st century, even some of us in West Virginia.
Ever since I was 14, I've been interested in cars, and I was a motorhead. I mean, I was a hot rodder. One of my first cars was a GTO that I made more performance out of, than it had when I bought it. It was an older GTO. It was a 1967, so I went through it, one end to the other. It's where I fell in love with cars, was that car. And to be quite honest, I went to college just because I wanted to know more about how it worked. I mean, because you look at a gasoline engine and all the moving parts, and it just intrigued me that all those pieces can be moving all the time, and they're as reliable as they are. I mean, it's just amazing. So I wanted to know how anyone could design and build something like that to be what they are. I mean, they're extremely reliable pieces of equipment, but they're extremely complicated. I guess it was about 2003, I don't remember the exact time. I learned about people that battery technology essentially was getting good enough to where they were converting cars to electric, and they also had the equipment available to just the average person. If they were technically inclined, they could convert a gasoline car over to electric. And being an engineer, I was intrigued with that. So I bought a very inexpensive car. It was a Ford Festiva. The gasoline engine ran, but it wasn't in good shape. So it was no loss to yank it. It burned quite a bit of oil, leaked. So we pulled the engine, and I went online and found places where you could buy electric motors that were powerful enough to propel a car, small car, and did all the calculations necessary to make sure that it would accelerate to a reasonable speed. And at the time, my son-in-law, he was interested in working with me too, and he helped me disassemble the car, take the engine out. I did have help from the Robert C. Byrd Center. They made some adapters for me to where I could mount the electric motor to the transmission of the Festiva. And of course, we had to distribute the weight of all the batteries, which wasn't that hard to do. I mean, we filled under the hood and behind the driver's seat with batteries, and without the gas tank, that weight wasn't back there. So I think we had 8 12-volt batteries, and I had Interstate Battery sold me batteries at their cost just because they were interested in the project. They couldn't believe I could build something like this. It only took us a couple of months really to do it, and once we finished putting it together, our first drive with it, we put it in first gear, and we didn't realize how much torque this little electric motor was going to have, and it about twisted the car in two. It was amazing. The only way we could make it controllable was to start out in third gear or fourth gear even, and we were able to just barely give it any pedal, and it just took off. It was amazing, completely silent. And my son-in-law actually drove it back and forth to work. He drove it for a long time. But one time I was driving it, and I pulled into a gas station just to get the bugs off the windshield, and of course it made no noise. And then I was getting ready to go, and a guy, I didn't realize it, but WSAZ news people were right next to me filling up their vehicle, and they were not quite understanding why this car was silent and it was moving. And so they interviewed me, and the guy got in my car immediately and just rode around, and they were just very intrigued. So I got a little notoriety from that.
There was an article in the newspaper about this fellow in Huntington who had done a conversion of a gas car, a Ford Festiva, to electric. And so I made contact with him, and also found out about Tony Wheeler with Paris Signs. He had done a conversion of a Gold Wing motorcycle to battery electric. And so the three of us and some other people that were interested in sustainability, we formed an organization Initially, we were called our organization Appalachian Alternative Energy Association. We had events and Earth Days and displayed our vehicles, gathered at each other's house and just have social events. But then as the real electric cars started coming out, we had other people interested in it. The group was kind of reformed into the West Virginia Electric Auto Association. And that was probably somewhere around 2012.
One of the big challenges with electric vehicles is charging, as most folks know. So WVEAA is working to improve charging opportunities throughout the state, especially level 2 charging. We've got a great partnership with Chip Pickering and his foundation out of Parkersburg to install level 2 chargers at municipal and nonprofit organizations. We've had several folks who have taken us up now on new chargers at Fairmont State, at a park in Lewisburg, and the Green Bank Observatory, and that's just a small sampling. We've also have been trying to work on fast direct current charging to enable electric vehicles to practically drive to and through West Virginia. And this is especially important for our out-of-state folks that need to travel to West Virginia for tourism, for business, or personal reasons, or folks that just need to travel through the state instead of going around it. We surveyed out-of-state drivers about preferred charging locations and have had some luck with the West Virginia Department of Transportation to encourage the deployment of DC fast chargers in some of these locations. We're really looking forward to seeing some of these locations in the future receive those chargers at Tamarack and at the State Capitol Complex to really facilitate electric travel through the state.
It's a result of a lobbying effort by the West Virginia Electric Auto Association, our advocacy, that state parks decided to install these chargers. We think it brings them business. As the director of the state parks told me, it gives him more heads on beds. So that's what he's looking for. And these chargers attract people to the parks.
It's amazing what they have come up with. Cars, it's electric, and does all the thinking for you. And I'm really fascinated by that because, they drive themselves and brake themselves. They do all these things that you normally would have to think twice about, but they don't. And as a Dr. Darren Harris had one, it fascinated me. He come out of the building one day and said, "Now watch this." He punched a few buttons and the car was way down in the parking lot. Started up, come up, pulled right up beside of them, and the door opens up and they get in it. And now he tells the car to take them home. Technology is way and beyond my comprehension. I tell you, it's the days of the old vehicles like this 56. You think it starts, and if it does start, that's good. Then you take off in it, and you may get there and you may not. You may have to stop along the road somewhere and follow the points a little bit, or fix a gas leak, or maybe push it down a hill to get it started. But that's kind of how they were.
So what are we doing as a state to make this transition and to encourage adoption? Are we looking at our history of electrification and mining and leveraging that moving forward if possible? Everything underground is electric. We have a lot of experience and a lot of good folks in the state who understand and really know that technology. So how do we leverage that moving forward?
I was a supply man. We had a little old buggy where I hauled ties through the areas where they worked and everything, because I was a buggy boy. They was battery repair. They wasn't no gas in them, but battery powered. Where you went, that's where they went. I've had to tribulate about all my life. The way it was, That's a nice looking piece of chain there. But it was a lot prettier than that buggy I run. Well, it was about half as high as that is. Because it laid down there, stretched it all out, and I laid down and run it all along the side. And had the foot power where I operated where I wanted it to go.
Well, basically, this is a 12-volt battery that all vehicles have, and it does the same thing that it does in a gasoline car. And then, like I said, there's 9 modules that are high voltage, which is orange cable. One's the battery, that's the floor of the car. One's the motor. Then you take the others sort of in order. This is called a power converter, and it converts the 355 volt DC from the battery to 14.5 to keep this charged. That's all it does. This is called a power distribution module, and the orange cable in the back here goes down to the battery. And then this one right here goes down to the unit, curves around the U to the one right beneath it, which is called a SPIM, a single power inverter module, and that converts the DC back to AC, and then goes from the SPIM down to the motor, which is right, I can touch the motor, it's right directly beneath it. So there's 1, 2, 3, the battery 4, the motor, this is number 5, and then right beneath this one, this is called the onboard charging module, and every EV has that because every EV can charge with alternating current. So you have to convert that to DC. So we take the either 120 or 240, and this module right here that I'm touching converts it up to 400 volts and converts it to DC, and then charges the 355 volt DC battery with 400 volts.
And as you will note, many of these young people looks under here, well, how's it run? There is nothing on the engine. What makes it run? Well, basically, as my father-in-law taught me years ago, this is a gasoline engine. It needs 2 things. It needs gas and a spark. If it's got that and the engine's good, it will run.
People worry about the range, but one nice thing about an electric car, it's sort of like your smartphone. You plug it in at home, the next morning you got a range of, you can have a range of well over 200 miles for the day without even stopping at a station to plug in and charge. But if you want to travel, there's charge stations, there's some decent, the infrastructure for Tesla is really good where you can charge at superchargers, and I made a trip to Austin, Texas back in February. Had no problem at all. The car's a great car to drive, probably drove itself maybe over 90% of the time driving, and they're also putting in more and more of the DC chargers around the country where the Bolt and other EVs can plug in and charge fast. But the typical charge for the Tesla on my trip was somewhere around 15 to 40 minutes, and then I could move on either to the next station, which could be over 200 miles, or maybe 150 to 200 miles or something.
That's running beautiful. For a 56, that's good.
Now mind you, I still love the sound of a good car, of a good gasoline car. I'm not going to be able to get that out of my blood, but the battery car, the electric car is just the future. There's just no way around it.
One of Larry's first electric cars was in my body shop, and he wanted me to plug it up, and for some reason or another, it didn't work right. I don't know if we had low voltage or what. I'm thinking that might have been it, but anyway, the red light come on the dash and it says there's a problem. The car would not start. And my brother-in-law lives in Charleston, which is about 85 or 90 miles from here. He said, I can fix it. You can? And me being an old timer said, how's he gonna fix this now? So after a few hours or so, he calls me and he said, go in there and try it now and see if it would start. Sure enough, the car was fixed. computer technology through the satellite and the system on his vehicle. He reprogrammed the electronics of it to make it work. Now that I witnessed, and that was amazing.
Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Yonder comes my darling coming down the line. Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Yonder comes my darling coming down the line. Every Monday morning they get 'em up on time. Said they march 'em down to Lone Rock, says look into that mine. Said they march 'em down to Lone Rock, says look into that hole. Oh, the very next time the captain comes, you better have your coal. Oh, buddy, won't you roll down the line? Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Yonder comes my darling coming down the line. Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Yonder comes my darling coming down the line. Take it, Sammy. Now the beans, they are half done, the bread is not so well, the meat is burn up, and the coffee's black as heck. But when they get your slack time, you're bound to come to call. For anything you get to eat tastes better cooked than raw. Oh, buddy, won't you roll down the line? Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Everybody, yonder comes my darling coming down the line. Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Yonder comes my darling coming down the line. Lay down, boys. Now the bank boss is a hard man, a man you all know well. And if you don't get the coal out, he's going to give you hallelujah. He'll march you to the stock pen, sit long before your call. And if you get coal out, you'll get none at all. Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Yonder comes my darling coming down the line. Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Buddy, won't you roll down the line? Yonder comes my darling coming down the line.
It wasn't long after we did the car conversion that I decided the only reasonable thing to do after that was to put on solar panels. So that was my next project. So I bought 2 solar panels and inverters, and I didn't realize it at the time, but they were legalizing grid tie solar installations. And so I did not have to have batteries to charge batteries. I could actually tie to the grid and let that be more or less my storage system. It would run the meter backwards whenever I was making too much power, and I'd get that back when the meter ran the other way. But they just legalized it when I was looking into doing this. So at the time, there was no one in West Virginia who'd done a grid tie solar system. It was a little complicated to find all the right people to talk to and get all the right forms and permits. And they weren't even sure about everything that needed to be done at the time. But I found everybody was very interested in helping me because they wanted to get through this first time setup. So I had a lot of help actually, and from the people at AEP and from the state of West Virginia. But it still took me a while to get all the parts and get it installed. And by the time I actually got it installed, I was the 3rd one in West Virginia to have solar panels. I only had 2, but I was the 3rd one in West Virginia.
So my wife and I were driving a long distance to work every day, and I've always been interested in fuel efficiency. And in 2015, we were finally at a location where we could buy our first electric vehicle, which was a Nissan Leaf, and we drove that vehicle up until about 2020. and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was a couple years after that that I actually got involved with solar in about 2017, and I installed a solar system to generate enough power to power the house and the car. And then, since the Leaf only had about an 84-mile range, and we really wanted a vehicle that could travel long distances, that's when I got interested in the Tesla. And I pre-ordered a Model 3 in, I think it was 2018, and then took delivery of that in late 2019. So it took just a little over a year to get it. We take long trips and frequently travel between Martinsburg and Charleston in the Model 3, and we take advantage of the Tesla superchargers at Morgantown and Charleston and Weston along that way. So coming up from technology to electric vehicles and then into solar, that's kind of been my journey.
The Tesla doesn't have a key fob, or when you can buy a key fob, but primarily it just uses a smartphone. And when you get in and put your foot on the brake, it knows who you are and adjusts your seat to the right position, and you don't turn it on. So when you're ready to go, with the brake on, you pull down on that, and it's in drive, and it's ready to go. The display shows we're on a back road here, so there's no lines, but you can be on a complex road where there's maybe 4 or 5 or more lanes, and it'll show them all on the display. Along with it'll show the difference between a sedan, SUV, a truck, a tractor trailer, a box car.
Talk about the autopilot that Tesla has provided. It's just wonderful. Out on the open road, interstate, it can do 95% of the driving all the way up. We've even taken it through Chicago, and it handles the, except when you get into a construction zone, you want to take it out of autopilot because the lane markings get messed up. And so you as a human need to take over when you need to. But it'll do the open road driving just great. Come up on a car, it'll go ahead and pass, and it adjusts things as things slow down, come down to zero as far as the the speed, and then when traffic starts back up, so it's great for stop and go traffic.
Yeah, my wife, she likes driving the car. She, you got the front trunk on it, and it really comes in handy for her. She'll go to the grocery store, and when she comes out, she surprises some people by opening the front trunk on it and putting her groceries in the front trunk. And then when she gets home and pulls in the garage, the front trunk is right at the steps going in the house, so it's handy for putting her groceries in. She loves the car.
Well, this isn't a Tesla, but even this little Chevy has plenty of torque and acceleration for jumping on the interstate. Interstate driving uses up a lot more range. Now, this is Sandstone Mountain, which has a 7% grade for about 5 miles. So I'll use about 30 miles of range just to get to the top of Sandstone Mountain.
Well, I mean, as far as driving the West Virginia mountains, fortunately, there's enough places where you can plug into where everywhere I've taken it, I've never had range anxiety. There's always been somewhere I could charge it. But I always research before I go to make sure there is somewhere. I'm not brave enough to just take off and go 300 miles without knowing where there's a plug-in. But luckily, there's a lot of places where you can do that now.
A lot of folks start with used electric vehicles. The gentleman who purchased my 2015 Leaf had never owned an electric vehicle before, but he was excited about the prospect and he wanted to get started. He was able to pick up a low mileage, good condition Leaf used for his driving around town, and he was thrilled with it. Although, newer electric vehicles are coming down in price, they are still pricier up front than a conventional gas-powered vehicle. But if you can look beyond that initial purchase price to the total cost of ownership, what does it really cost to fuel and maintain and operate that vehicle? Then what you find is that even if it costs a little more up front, it can cost less over that period of ownership. We are close to reaching cost parity. If you look at studies from the large investment banks and other organizations, they're projecting that price parity in the next about 3 to 5 years.
And I cannot work on that car. It is way too complicated. It's all nothing but wires and computers. And even though I understand computers, I wouldn't put my finger on one of those. So yeah, but that's sort of true with modern gasoline engine too. It's hard to work on those as just a shade tree mechanic.
But with technology the way it is nowadays, and these young people, they're computer whizzes. They're catching on quickly. We will be replace us old timers. And the electric cars, no big deal. Hey, I can fix it. Let me punch this machine here. And they get in contact with the satellite up there, and it comes down and says, your problem is fixed. We reprogrammed this or that.
But the nice thing about these all-electric cars is you don't have big radiator system, you don't have the exhaust system, you don't have all the pollution control equipment. The brakes last forever in it because the regenerative braking slows the vehicle down to a stop. Since I've got my Tesla, a year and a half, I've put 25,000 miles on the car, and the only thing I've had to do to it is rotate the tires. And I thought I needed to put some windshield washer fluid in it, but when I went to put it in, it didn't need that. So there's almost nothing to do to this vehicle.
Well, that's true with the electric car for sure. You don't have to take them in for maintenance like you do a gasoline car. So you aren't going to have somebody changing oil, mechanic changing oil, replacing mufflers and brakes. That is sad, but there were people making buggy whips at one time too, and they're gone. So I'm hoping just with generations as they go by, mechanics will start working on, people who would have been mechanics will start working on computers or working on Teslas or building wind farms. I don't know. It's got to be an evolution.
We'll make it run. If it ain't out of gas. My gas gauge shows empty.
It's not just electric vehicles, but really, any new technology. I can think back to the 1980s when I was getting involved with personal computers and the internet didn't exist. Everything was being created. And you're truly a pioneer. You are building a new world, and there are risks. The technologies you choose may not pan out. Manufacturers may not continue to exist. Things can go south. Things don't work out quite as you would expect. And I wasn't in at the very beginning with in 2010 or 11 when Nissan first came out with the Leaf. But even in 2015, it was still kind of an odd choice. But this was, first generation product. The range was still pretty small, only 84 miles at that time. The batteries were tested, but Nissan had some issues with quality on some of their earlier battery technology. So just with any new technology, you face those types of risks and concerns. But as someone who has chosen to be a part of that and participate, one phrase that I use when I purchased a Tesla is that it was a time machine. It allows me to experience the future today. So that's what you're signing up for. And, there's the good. You're the first there. You are the first guy with boots on the ground, but you go through some things, some of those teething pains, some of those issues. And hopefully you can help manufacturers and others solve those problems and make the products better. I think all electric vehicle pioneers have done that, telling manufacturers what they want, what they need, and what's going to help those vehicles succeed for consumers.
One guy will say that car is bad because you're not using oil and you're going to put people out of business. But the way I see it is it burns coal, if you want to say the electricity came from coal. And so I'm burning West Virginia coal, whereas if anybody buys gasoline, they're buying, who knows, they may be getting their oil from Saudi Arabia to make their gasoline. So I'm keeping my energy in the U.S. But the preferred method for me is to get it from renewable sources like solar and windmills, which you can't do with a gasoline-powered car. And I feel like that we've got to do something about the pollution and the greenhouse gases. And you can't burn carbon-based fuels to produce electricity to provide transportation. Somehow or another, we've got to have a bigger system for making electricity. But I feel like, as far as West Virginia, it is burning coal for the time being until coal goes out.
I'm very excited that the new trend seems to be toward electric. It seemed like that was going to happen in the past, and then it sort of dwindled, and now it appears hopeful to me that electric cars are going to be the thing of the future.
So I still own one internal combustion vehicle, a Nissan Rogue Sport, and basically I consider that to be my last combustion engine vehicle. And when I sell that thing, I'll replace it with another electric vehicle, probably a Tesla Model Y. And after experiencing what electrics can do, the quietness of operation, the power, and all the features, and being able to fuel it with solar that I produce myself, I really just don't see going back to anything else.